I'm failing on the Jabber screen.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Can somebody in the back of the room close the door? Thank you. Thank you. You know, I'm not sure what it says that all of you all are on that side of the room.
It's noticeable, right?
It is. It's like we're over here. We're over here.
Now we all have to walk that far just to get to the microphone.
Exactly.
If you want to buy that new section of that agenda that you made tonight. That's why I did that.
All right, who wants to be a Jabber? You're doing that too?
Dave's doing notes, Bill's doing notes, I'm doing Jeff.
Ah, all right. That's good by me.
I can't get Jeff to work, so I can't. Excuse me, that guy, I don't use Jeff either. I have no idea.
There is absolutely documentation. There's even links. If you go to the newcomer slide, it actually even provides pointers to how to use the Jabber tools. I didn't say getting it to work was a demonstration, but he said there's no documentation. There is documentation. Okay, we're going to get started now, and we might separate you guys over there if you don't stop talking. Okay. We are now at 2 minutes past the hour. That's why you all sat over there. So, all right. So welcome to the Sacm Working Group. And we want to get moving because we are in the last slot on Thursday. And so the sooner we get through this, the sooner. That's right. It's an upgrade over the last slide on Friday. I thought it was the penalty box, actually. Okay, this is the note well, which you have seen all week. Please abide by it. If you have any questions, please see our esteemed AD. And next slide. There you go. Agenda bashing. So I know Kathleen is not here, and she did have an agenda bash. So we will.
We'll bash later.
Well, we know that she wants to say something, and so we will add it when she gets here. Any other agenda bashing? All right, as you're well aware, we have 3 documents under working group last call. So the first order of business is to discuss each of those documents and discuss each of those and see what the status of it is. And I have been instructed to start with EPCP, which I'm still struggling because I finally learned.
We got several very good reviews. We will absolutely get right on top of incorporating the comments from those reviews in the document, and I'll try to get, would it be too late to say September? This next month's awful. The AD says it's fine.
Yeah. It must be okay then. So,
No. Could you imagine? No.
so so did you see any showstopper issues? Do you think there's any showstopper issues in there?
No, just Hank might not live past my having to deal with his 97 comments. But other than that, it's fine. I'll let you know where the body is.
Oh. We told them that you wanted to say something. All right, so you see no showstopper issues. You plan for an update in September, and then we will address getting it out of working group last
Yep.
call at that point.
Yep.
Fabulous.
Kathleen, we'll put you after we go over the working group last call docs.
Okay, Stephen, Raleigh?
So I have a very small number of slides. Hopefully this will be super fast. So I have done some updates on the software descriptor extension to Rolly in accordance with the review that I received. The first round of reviews that I got when the working group last call first started were all integrated into version 7. And then we had the extended working group last call, and I got an additional several reviews. That's all been integrated into version 8, which I have posted. It was like at the start of this week, like Sunday or something like that. So the most recent version reflects all of the review that I've gotten during working group last call. I had a lot of really great comments and a lot of really great fixes and little things like that. Next slide, please. The only thing that I would consider a major change, and it's not even really that, is actually a typo fix in a normative requirement. The required application media type for the CoSWID was originally CoSWID plus CBOR, which was a mistake, and that should have been application/SWID plus CBOR. It's taken right out of the CoSWID draft. So that typo was fixed, that mistake is fixed, and now we're in alignment with the CoSWID draft and everything is good to go. And was always meant to reference that in the first place. And then just a lot of minor fixes, some language changes, the kind of stuff you'd expect to see at the end of a working group last call. So I think the document's in really good shape at the end of its working group last call. And next slide, please. So this draft does have a normative reference to CoSWID, but not the other way around. So I think that timing is good to kind of move them both along at the same time here up so that we can get that reference resolved. So I think the document's ready to move on to the next step and leave up to the chairs what they think.
Okay. Based on the mailing list traffic, I didn't see any opposition to the draft. Does anybody here have any further comments based on the working group last call? Nope. Okay. I guess then with that, we will exit working group last call and progress it onward and upward.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your review and all the help in getting the draft good. Thanks.
And CoSWID.
So CoSWID. So this draft is intended to provide a concise format that helps to identify and describe software components, patches, and installation bundles that either may be installed on a device or may be found on a device. It uses the concise binary object representation to express this information. The CoSWID draft is based on similar constructs that exist in ISO IEC 19770-2, which is called software identification tags. So one way of thinking about CoSWID is it's the maybe younger brother of SWID tags. We've been working on the draft for a while. It's been in working group last call. We received quite a few comments during the working group last call, so really grateful to all of the reviewers. I think we had something like nine reviews. At this point, we've addressed the comments that were provided by the reviewers. Three reviewers provide us with detailed comments. Those adjustments are published in the -12 revision, which is now out there on the data tracker. That was this morning. The one exception was, I think Alex pointed out one additional typo that isn't in that version. So I figured, I'll wait until we see if there's any more comments, and then I'll just submit a quick update before it goes through to the ISG. So there were a bunch of changes as a result of the working group last call. None that were significant from a normative perspective, but a lot of clarification. So fixed a bunch of minor editorial issues, a lot of typos here and there, a lot of little grammar fixes. We added text about the use of UTF-8 and COSWID, which was already implied because we use CBOR and CBOR uses UTF-8, but we're explaining that more explicitly now. The one normative change I believe that we made as far as the model was adjusted the tag ID to allow for a UUID to provide it as a 16, that should be 16 byte B string. And that was based on Karsten's feedback. I did a lot of work to clean up descriptions about index ranges, removed a lot of the discussion about the size of various fields, but instead talked about the ranges. Adjusted the discussion about private use ranges within the draft to make it more clear. I did move the private use to negative integer values, which is more consistent with some other CBOR-based drafts, which also then makes the standards track and specification required ranges slightly larger, which I think is also a benefit. That didn't actually change any of the initial registrations, so it's really not a big normative change. I added some discussion around resolving overlapping value spaces for version schemes because I also added some expert review guidelines that require that version schemes don't have overlapping namespaces, and some of the initial ones do, but we're stuck with those because we're using the initial values that come from SWID tags to stay in sync with that specification. So there's some discussion around which version scheme you should use if it overlaps with the value space of other version schemes. And then the expert review guidelines, I think, will give us will give expert reviewers a much better basis by which to review all of the new IANA registries by. It says things like, avoiding vanity names, and it provides some guidance around providing clear semantic definitions of what each of the valid values represent. Let's see, and then based on some of the other comments that we've gotten through working group last call, I added IANA registrations. There's 3 new ones that have been added. These are registrations for the SWID and SWID path URI schemes, which are used in both SWID tags and COSWID tags, and a registration for using COSWID with SWIMA, which Charles had asked for a long time ago. But I neglected to go back and look at those archives. So that's all of the changes in the -12 revision. So at this point, all open issues on the draft have been addressed. We've completed all changes needed based on the provided comments. So looking to the chairs for advice on how to move forward. Yes?
Who are you pointing?
Oh.
Pointing to the jabber stuff.
Is there something in?
Oh.
Look away for 1 minute. Okay, I'm Ira McDonald on Jabber. Dave, you added RFC 5198, but Karsten is writing successor and didn't like the 5198 reference.
Yeah, so I looked at that, and the real difference between 5198 and its success and its potential successor, because it's still a personal draft, is dealing with line feeds. Because 5198 basically requires that you use carriage returns and line feeds as a line ending character. And if you want just line feeds alone, you can't get that based on the current definition. But that didn't seem like something that was worth actually holding up the publication of COSWID around, because the line endings that are defined in the current RFC seem to be enough for the kinds of use cases that we're trying to support.
This is a small comment. It's just baggage from Telnet. Okay.
Yeah.
Unicode is relatively old, so a modern one person will take care of that, but we cannot pull it in. First of all, it's personal track. Second of all, we don't know how this evolves. It's not a stable reference, and it's not a blocker for our work. We could make an errata later and say we can make it better with this Unicode version, but I think this is not something we have to be concerned about right now.
Yeah, and I would be happy to write a draft that would update COSWID at some point in the future if this becomes an issue.
This is channeling Ira McDonald again. I agree with keeping the 5198 reference.
Thanks, Ira.
Okay, are there any other comments on this draft? Okay, just one second. So,
So I do have to submit one more revision because there's one more small typo. So if you could, oh yeah.
you are out of cycle. Actually, what we had just discussed was because the draft, despite the fact that it did not have a lot of substantive changes, we thought we would give like a 2-week period for people to have a chance to review the final draft before we forward it. As far as we're concerned, we have consensus of the working group to forward it, and people have one last chance to get all of the last typos fixed. Does that work for everybody? I think we've had good review on this, so I guess our browbeating at the
I would
last
say
meeting.
we're beyond good review at this point. It's been a lot of revisions.
Oh, I was going to say good working group last call review.
Yeah.
So.
Send them in.
So we'll do a 2-week double check of the updated draft. And so if I were you, I would hold that one typo.
Yeah.
For the next.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions on this draft? Okay.
Who's shepherded the draft?
We haven't determined a shepherd yet. Do we need to do that now? No. Okay, good.
All right. Thank you.
So Kathleen, I think.
Working on it.
Thank you. Great. And how much time do I have? 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3, 4? So might generate discussion or punt it to an interim?
So more than 1, less than 10.
Oh, great.
Roman, I was asking, are we out of administrative items?
Just going through.
Well, we were going through working group last call. Were there other administrative items?
I was going to ask the milestone date updates for the documents that are not in working group last call.
Yeah, we
A sense
have.
of those, we'll talk about it later.
Oh, we can talk about it later.
Just do a search for IETF and you'll find it. In that page.
You're
I know.
Chromebook. You don't know my history with these.
Maybe I should have brought, oh, I don't have the adapter for mine. Okay. So I think a few of you, maybe not. I think, was it just Chris and I at the Karis workshop? So we went through some brainstorming exercises. And for one section, we talked about adoption and lack of adoption on protocols, just to kind of get a feel of what helps. And in thinking about this work, I really want to see it get adopted, right? And so one of the core findings was for the protocols or structured formats that haven't taken off wildly, the work done didn't match what people wanted. Right? And so I want to make sure, and I know it's kind of late to do that, that we kind of reassess. And this is after I took a look at a few documents recently, and also, seeing that we might be splitting off separately from what SCAP is doing. Is that the right decision? Who's listening to the users most? So with sticks, people aren't as interested as the discussion from Kara, so maybe it's different from reality for other people. They're more interested in using it as a format to manage their content than they are for exchanges. And IODEF, it described more than what people wanted to exchange. So that might have been one of the hindrances to adoption. So in thinking about this, I think it's pretty clear people want to assess their system integrity. They want to get the data in on their systems, be able to map it back to expected policies, and have secure systems. So, and then we have different methods of exchange that we've discussed. We've discussed XMPP Grid. We've discussed ROLI. I personally can see the case for exchange within an enterprise. I could see, out to a managed service that's doing assessments, and you may have different exposures than I do. And so I kind of wanted to just take that step back for a minute and see, maybe it's customer driven. What are the cases where you're going to see this used, if it's your products you're hearing from customers, where the exchange or the formats are needed? Anyone? Yeah, and then I'm even wondering, there's some brainstorming exercises we did at Karis. It might be worth doing some of those, and I do have tools that we could do it online, where we could collaborate and just kind of reassess, just to see if we could, maybe we're on the right track for adoption. Maybe we need to reassess and make sure we're doing the right thing towards adoption.
Yeah, Adam Montville, CIS. So from CIS, experience at CIS, right?
Yeah.
We develop best practices, CIS controls, and then we have all the benchmarks and everything. And we offer a variety of different tools, software, right, that help people actually implement that stuff. A lot of the feedback we get, or questions, I should say, that we get from users of the CIS controls is, wow, that's a lot of tools to use. How do I get them to work together quickly? Right, I see my fingers.
Right.
Right, what they want is that interoperability out of the box, so it's not so expensive. So, and what comes to mind is a blog post from one of the product managers at Tripwire.
Okay.
Who he recently posted, I think it was just earlier this month, perhaps. They have this idea where they actually want to create a community of open source tools that just work together. And to me, it's kind of like, okay, yes, let's do that, but let's let them work on a common infrastructure.
And based on standards.
Correct, right, which is kind of where I see this work being, like this working group, right? Can we establish what that common infrastructure needs to look like, so that the different components in the various different workflows that need to happen just talk to each other.
Okay, and so are the most common components within a network exchanges between networks?
I would say all of the above.
Okay,
to be honest, right?
Do we need
So-
to divide it out in terms of how we get, staged adoption? Don't let me run too long. Like I could develop a whole little session. Like Chris was there at Karis. I could develop a little session for an interim where we could really brainstorm this, and I could make you guys use posties and really fun things for online collaboration.
That sounds like a threat.
What?
That sounds like a threat.
I want
All
to
right.
see this. I want to see Adam's goals met, right? Like what
Also-
you said. I want to see that happen. And I want all the hard work happening from you guys to go forward and make an impact, because the endpoints have problems, don't they?
So let's hear what the rest of the queue has to say.
Thank
and
you.
then
I'll be
we'll-
quiet.
So Brett Jordan, I will stand with my vendor hat on.
Mhm.
So I do have experience in some of these pieces. The more complex a standard is, the less likely we as vendors are going to implement, unless we have extreme compelling reasons from customer demand. So it's usually easier when they're simple and easy and they're iterative and we add to them and we can add functionality and features. But if I give this to product management and then to architects to look at and they come back and tell me, oh, well, that's 9 months or 12 months before we can implement, it's not going to happen. Let me finish, okay? And if things come back and they say, oh yeah, I can do some of this over the weekend, it may not take over the weekend, but it does get done. So I've ranted about this before in standards, not just here, but in lots of other places, that there's a PR marketing problem that we all suffer from. And it really takes a lot of work to get the market to understand it, to get the various communities to know what it is, how it works, why they should be asking their vendors for it, and boiling it down into bite-sized chunks that people can grok. And so I was joking earlier, like who's going to start writing like the get started guide for some of these things, like to help people. And I know we've done some of it, and you've done a lot of excellent work with this, but a Stanford design school exercise with Post-it notes might be a really good thing. So.
Ask you a question.
You can ask me a question.
Sorry. So it's Adam again. As a vendor then, right? So perspective I have, I think, is that none of this work here, the code components that you would implement as a vendor, right, would be considered your secret sauce, your core stuff that you need to get done, right? I think that would be true for any vendor. So the question I have is, if there were collaboratively developed open software that you could integrate with your tools so that you didn't have to bear all the cost of developing this, would that help?
It can help, but it also depends on the complexity of the code that we are consuming and the liability of the maintenance of that code. Interoperability is critical. Interoperability documents and Plugfest, where we actually get vendors together and we actually start working on things, and kind of like the hackathon, but at a different level, are critical. I won't speak on sticks, but just purely as the vendor side of it, there's things like this that can help. But you also have to distill these hundreds of pages of documents into things that product management and architects can understand, because quite honestly, they're not going to read it. So they'll read it once there's a commitment by the business unit to implement. And so I like a lot of these technologies. That's why I come. That's why I try to support them. I try to read as much of it as I can. And much to Dave's chagrin, I may actually have comments on his document. But I think that there's a PR marketing problem that I think we could work on and help. And so I have done some of this.
So I think the step back to see what the core pieces are that build might be quite useful.
This is Hank, and talking about this never-ending cycle of what are we actually going to do. Does the customer need this? And is it interoperable? You might be very happy about the results that will be presented by Bill from the hackathon, because we're sick and tired of talking about stuff. We started implementing for 3 hackathons now. And we now have tangible, really good things to show that basically there's light at the end of this tunnel right now. And I think this might push some things that you actually wanted to.
Okay.
Dave Waltermeyer. So
I think we're probably on time.
I cut.
So we started this process, 7 years ago? And when we originally were chartering, I showed up as long as, in addition to a bunch of other folks from the SCAP community, because we wanted to work on sort of the next versions of some of the core SCAP specifications, things like XCCDF and OVAL and those kinds of things. And we ran into some problems organizing that work. We ran into problems with getting IPR released on some of that work, and it ended up dragging out for 2 or 3 years. And in that time frame, the SCAP community more or less left and didn't come back. So we're here now with really not much of that community in this room, a little bit of it, but not much. And recently, Jess and I have been working to try to rebuild that community, because when we started working on Sacm, we basically said, we're not going to meet as a community anymore. We're going to start meeting inside the IETF to actually do this work. And we basically stopped meeting as a community. And now, and so as a result, folks actually said, oh, is SCAP dead? You know, are you no longer working on that? Because really for the last 7 or so years, there hasn't been much work on it. We're starting to rebuild that community by meeting outside of the IETF, and we're starting to get some interest on doing some new authoring formats around things like CCPF and OVAL. I'm really reluctant to suggest to those people that we should go back and try the IETF again, because it just didn't work the first time. And
Okay, so that's one thing. I want to figure out what we're doing here. But we can do this, I think, in an interim, that we're doing something, not just for the US, the broader community, that makes sense, that's digestible, that will get implemented, that will actually solve these problems.
Okay, and Jess, I'm sorry, but I wouldn't I cut the mic and then wouldn't let him talk. No, that's okay.
But I mean, that's kind of where a lot of folks in the SCAP community kind of look at things right now.
Okay. So.
Thank you for the time.
Right, so the question of having you, giving you some interim time, was that?
Does that make sense? Would people like that? Just, yeah, okay.
Okay, let's do the official IETF way. Everybody hum that would like to see some interim time devoted to this. Hum if you would rather not. Oh, look at that.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
It is. It was. If he pushed the right button. Oh, okay. Push the button again. There we go.
Try this time.
There you go. All right. Okay, so we're going to talk about the hackathon. So Hank approves of the hackathon, which is good. Everybody wants that. Again, I'll mention Carl Heinz a couple times on here, but he joined the hackathon remotely from Germany and throughout the weekend and provided a lot of help. So we had a number of objectives going in. Kind of wanted to start talking a little bit about how to represent what information to collect from an endpoint, how to represent what was collected. Kind of dovetailing a little bit on some of the SCAP stuff. I'll probably talk a little bit about that on other slides, but I used some adaptations of some SCAP content in there. We wanted to implement a simple collector actually to interpret that what to collect information and actually get it from that endpoint. Thankfully, I work on a tool that does stuff like that. So we wanted to do some cool things with XMPP as transport. We wanted to, I tried to get the ability to use a number of different XMPP features to actually shuttle the data around and cause good things to happen. So the IQ stanzas, the information query, allows a request and response sort of model to tell a collector to actually grab information from the endpoint and send it back to the entity that requested it. There's some other entities, other stanzas out there and other functionality. We use publish subscribe capabilities of XMPP to do that as well, to move that information around, and actually ended up being able to shuttle it around using just basic XMPP messages. So just as I would send a chat message to somebody, I can send a payload to tell that entity to collect and not really care if they send me a response and just assume that either they would send something back if there was an error processing it, or just go off and do its thing and send the data to where it's supposed to go. On top of that, we wanted to do some cool things with Concise Map. We wanted to take the collected information, those system characteristics that we collected from that endpoint, translate that into to the Concise Map CBOR format. We modeled a little bit of that collected information into CDDL, and I'll get to that on a couple of slides. And then we wanted to kind of extract that content back out from that map representation and reconstruct it as XML to make sure that it was still the same, which we did. So talking a little bit about the data models, the what to collect and what information is collected. Currently, the current OVAL data models actually tightly couple collection and evaluation into a very large document-centric kind of format. So you kind of have to send all of the things that you want to test and evaluate and collect and all that kind of stuff in one big format. I actually extracted out all of the collection piece to make it its own sort of separate namespace. So all you have to actually pass is are the what OVAL calls objects, which really allows you to just indicate what to collect. There's some other things in there, but we didn't get into the more complicated things that you can do with OVAL, like sets and filters and variables and things like that. They're modeled in there, but we didn't test any of it. So again, we redefined some of the namespaces, called it OVAL collections, and then all you need to do is, again, send like, I only want this registry key, or I only want this, what did we use? Environment variable, for example. So there's a number of platform-specific schemas that are out there. So I just migrated the core and the platform independent. That kind of gave me a list of 10 or 12 objects that I needed to figure out how to collect. There's some cool XML that shows what that is. There's a family object, which is pretty, gives the operating system family, and we did some environment variables. Those were basically the two objects we tested with. The system characteristics that would come back, if anybody wants to know what my IP address was. Okay, it's not on there, but the computer name environment variable on my machine is called syscat dev, just in case anybody wants to know that. So this is an example of simple system characteristics that come back once you've collected that information from the previous slide. So again, we were joined by Carl Heinz. He stayed up nicely till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturday in Germany to keep working on stuff. He is the expert on the Concise Map stuff, and a Java guy as well. So we had a good time conversing through Hank's sort of video chatting capabilities, and we're able to, if anybody saw me with headphones on the entire time I was talking to Carl Heinz. So we created the XMPP extensions to handle those collection requests, actually perform the collection, generate the system characteristics, and actually shuttle that data back via XMPP. Again, we did it through standard request response capabilities in the XMPP IQ standards. We did it through publish subscribe. We did it right through direct XMPP messages as well. On Carl Heinz's end, he received the collected system characteristics via an XMPP adapter that he built. So it basically just listens for the messages and is able to handle the payloads that we sent back. Translated all that into the CBOR data, published it to the map, was able to query that, and then translate that data back to the XML format. We kind of had the previous slide kind of showed how the work was divvied up. I was kind of basically responsible for the XMPP infrastructure, the OVAL related stuff in the actual collection, which looks, the pub sub looks like this. So the orchestrator would request the information to be collected. The collector would collect it and send it back, and then the orchestrator would publish that to the pub sub topic. And then the German side of the equation was the XMPP adapter and translating and saving all that stuff into the map data. The direct IQ just basically replaces the pub subtopic with the XMPP adapter on the German side. I like this German and American side stuff. That's good. The direct XMPP message, again, sort of does not include the response. Oh, I didn't update all of that slide. So that IQ response containing oval system characteristics should be deleted from that slide. Sorry, and it just has the collector sending the message stanza with the system characteristics. Karl Heinz did all the again the stuff on the German side. So he was able to configure his XMPP adapter to subscribe to that pub subtopic to receive that information. He also was able to configure message listeners to be able to retrieve again all of that data in a standard message payload and a standard IQ stanza to then translate that into CBOR and move that into the map client and translate it back out. This is what the concise map model looked like. So it's a series of identifiers and metadata that sort of links those identifiers. So I guess I can't really walk over there, but the system identifier there is one of the identifiers. The collection identifier, which is the one on the far right-hand corner, identifies the actual act of collection. The different identifiers for the items that are right next to the collection one identify basically the family item and the environment variable that we collected. Again, this is all linkage together, and we could query both by system and by the collection identifier to retrieve all of the associated data that we needed. In very light font and very small font with some large arrows on it. It kind of shows what the translated what the CBOR looks like before it's translated into binary. So we've got the representation of what those identifiers look like and what the all the linkages between them. So I'll try not to make you read that eye chart. So we actually learned a ton in this. We were able to, again, sort of use all of XMPP's capabilities to both to publish, subscribe, send the request response, and send a direct message stanza containing all that payload to actually trigger the collection, to receive the system characteristics, send them over to the other side. We were able to, again, translate that map data or translate the system characteristics into the map data, pull that, extract that information back out, and reconstruct the oval system characteristics from it, which can then help eventually enable some downstream operations on that, such as evaluation, reporting, etc. One thing we did learn, currently that there's not a really dynamic way to sort of configure the map client. It kind of has to be pre-configured with the CDDL to kind of know exactly what's coming, which means the CDDL would need to continuously evolve as the capabilities to collect and distribute that content were to evolve as well. So my collector was actually able to, it's fully sort of SCAP compliant, so it can collect a number of different platform-specific items, but the concise map implementation on the other side could really only handle the family and environment variable items that we decided on before the hackathon. Things to keep going. We were able to really kind of help define some of the operations and interactions between components. So we want to start moving them to get them included in as part of the architecture. A lot of the information from the various data models can be used, and then hopefully to, again, sort of start defining that core set of operations, that core set of interactions between the different components. we can continue to refine the oval collection models. So this is kind of where I think it kind of connects a little bit with some of the SCAP work that's going on. I don't necessarily have a favorite place where that migration could take place. I'm happy to continue to flesh out the oval collection models and that decoupling of collection and evaluation and take it to the SCAP 2.0 working groups, some of the endpoint data collection and oval authoring groups to see how that flies. Again, I've got no problems doing that. I was at those workshops as well. Keep building more collection capabilities based on the different data models. Start looking at perhaps some hackathons where we can store actual policy and actual definitions and tests and things like that to be able to take that data downstream and actually do some evaluation on it. Yeah, last big thing, again, for Karl Heinz, hopefully some folks named Hank will take those messages back of thanks to him. And again, for staying up really late. Hank, I'll say, was also pretty instrumental in enabling some of our collaboration and getting going to really get this hackathon off the ground. So I really appreciate that. So thanks to Hank. I think that's it. Yep.
Okay. Hi, this is Stephen Banghart. First of all, Bill, thanks for all the work that you did and for all the work that Karl did. I mean, I was there at the hackathon and you guys were working hard the entire time. We got a ton done and it was cool to kind of see the output of that. On the SCAP front, I think that just kind of acting as a liaison for that effort, I think that even this presentation would be more than welcome in something like the endpoint collection group.
Sure.
And that we could work something out and even organize something like that. I think that would be great.
Awesome.
So this is Hank. Thanks for the excellent overview. And I think this will feed into a lot of the things we were stalling at. Bill mentioned operations. Like the actual things we need the architecture to define how to interact with other components. We have two starkly different data models that we could show interoperability with, okay, 2 items on the CDDL side yet, but it is a proof of concept. So if we can all of them. It's basically the proof of concept is done with this. Now this is the legwork of creating the missing CDDL for the semantic map graph. And the interconnection works like canonical. Basically, from XML to CDDL and back, and there was no loss, and you could do it all the time. So basically, we have a interoperability plugfest achieved right now, and that is, I think, the very important thing here. That there is actually something coming out of this, not only with respect to code, and yay, it's plugging and working, but we have found the basis to create the actual data model that will be able to fuel multiple protocols, and that we can now understand better what orchestration really looks like. And if we do this again, and then maybe again, probably are relatively complete, because we will stop working at this in between. We have this really ongoing work. And therefore, we will not rely on the hackathons alone. Thanks.
I'd say it might also be worth exploring, just from my perspective and not knowing necessarily too much about how the CDDL would be built, to maybe see if there's a more generic way to represent it, so we don't have to keep expanding it, and we can represent the oval data, for example, in something that doesn't necessarily always need a lot of modification.
Yeah, well, at the moment, the problem is that we don't have a CDDL parser, so the code has to represent the specification. All boils down that we need a CDDL parser that then creates classes you can instantiate for the code. That is basically the thing.
Right.
Here.
Right.
Yeah, we have that on multiple fronts. We will have one in C, unfortunately, not in Java first, but it is on the list.
Okay. Sweet. Okay. That's it.
Any other questions? No, thank you very much, Bill, and thanks to Karl.
Hi. How much time do I have? As fast as I can. Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
smart.
Cool. Sacm architecture. This actually probably won't take very long. There's some pending changes to the draft that Bill and I are making. We want to remove the XMPP based solution from the draft pretty much entirely right now in the unpublished, like in the GitHub, right? We moved it to an appendix depending on what people say. It belongs or it doesn't. If nobody has an opinion, we'll yank it. Maybe we'll put it into a separate draft if that makes sense. We want to combine the current section 3.1 with the current section 4, which becomes the new section 3. And we'd like to narrow the focus to a single workflow. And the one we happen to be most familiar with is basically configuration management, configuration assessment, right? Which is still state assessment when it boils down to everything. And then a few clarifications as covered on subsequent slides. There's enterprise boundaries mentioned in the draft, and what we didn't want was that to be inferred as being traditional endpoints only. So really it wasn't intended to indicate only on-prem stuff. It's supposed to also mean, anything that the enterprise has to operate, whether they actually own that infrastructure or if it's shared infrastructure or what have you, right? So that was one clarification we're going to make. Another clarification, this one's probably more important, is talking a little more about capability versus interface versus operations. Before I get into those three things, you might consider interface and operation combined at the abstract level to be like an interaction between different components that have various capabilities. But essentially, what we want to be able to say for a capability is some product can assess, like it says in the little sub-bullet, product foo can assess configuration for Windows, Mac, and AWS using OVL 5.11.2. Like we want to be able to express that between components so that they know where to go when they have something that needs to be done with one of those classes of technology, essentially. For an interface, we want to be able to say configuration assessment of Windows 10 using OVL 5.11.2. That's an interface that basically implements that to some degree, right? Does that make sense so far? We want to be able to specify interfaces at that level eventually, right? Probably in the solution level and maybe not the high level architecture. Operations, I want to gather system characteristics from Windows 10. Basically, you're telling something, go collect this information, right? That's essentially an operation. We'll put some clarification in the draft around these things and people can comment and complain, maybe, I don't know. The sub-architectures, we did want to talk about that a little bit too, just to make it clear. The overall Sacm architecture kind of does have this dual nature in terms of sub-architectures. There's collection subsystems, right? So like the EPCP, right? EPCP draft, ECP, formerly ECP draft, is a collection sub-architurecture. And this Sacm architecture supports that. It also supports the idea of gang push or using an OVL-based system that doesn't go through EPCP, right? It's intended to support all of these things. So we kind of call those the collection architectures, collector subsystems. And then above that, so to speak, is more of the cooperative tooling, which is what we talked about at the beginning when Kathleen was talking about what we're doing here, basically, right? So the cooperative tooling architecture is essentially how do all these different components in a standardized way start to talk to each other without a lot of operator intervention, if any, if that's possible. Yes, we want to clarify components. So I mentioned we're initially focusing on configuration management. We will propose specific components and we'll provide some descriptive details for each of those components in terms of their capabilities, the interactions they have between each other, and even the different types of interactions. So in the hackathon, for example, they had PubSub, they used IQ, which is, I believe, query response, and then they had message, which is just you send it, and unless you hear something bad, you assume it went well, right? So there are those different ways of dealing with these workflows, right? So we're going to kind of talk about how we do that as well with configuration management with specific proposed components. There are 2 open questions in the draft. Should workflows be documented in the draft or in separate drafts? We're going to start in the draft, and if we need to, we'll move it out. Same thing for interfaces or interactions. Basically, we'll start in the draft and move them out when it's necessary. So basically, the more detailed it becomes, I think then it becomes more of a solution. And once it crosses that line, wherever that line might be, we can move that into a separate draft. That's it. I don't have a question slide, so it just doesn't move. Oh,
It's the same. I rarely say this, but when my most emergency fire are done and resolved, I will join again and do the operation review with you, the architecture. Yeah, I can do that. I plan to have time starting in September. So because then the most important things are in place, and then I can actually join you again.
Okay, so yeah, that's good. So I think my intent is to publish this before I go on holiday, which is Sunday. So hopefully we'll be able to publish the update. You guys can give it a read. Because we moved a bunch of the stuff out, it won't be very long. And
I'm landing on Saturday and we're on vacation Sunday in another country.
Yeah. Well, it's good beach reading, right? Didn't somebody say that earlier? Beach reading? Yeah.
Right, Arnaud Tadei, Symantec, so thank you for the presentation. So I have 3 points. One is very minor, if you can come back to your diagram.
Maybe.
Which?
You had, yes, this one. So just to say that I think it took me 5 minutes to understand there were things on the right side because I am colorblind, so just couldn't see. But
sorry,
no problem. So now, more seriously, if you have a slide about some kind of expressions. I think you have a slide with some kind of expressions. Yes, this one. So I'm new. I'm completely new here. So I'm really completely naive. Are you referring to a very formal expression language here that you have behind, or?
No, honestly, no. I'm not necessarily thinking that. I mean, if we could get to that point, I think that could help. But this was really just trying to be more pedantic about defining these things that we call a capability and an interface and operation.
Right. So actually, my point is that it's not pedantic. It's really important. I think I say that because I'm chairman at ITU SG17, and we recently had a person who came with a new work item for a universal syntax for security expressions that was quite remarkable. We started to work on that, and we started to see a lot of benefit. I think actually he started to present to Tony Rutkowski and others to the CIS organization as well. So maybe there are dots to connect. But I think it really matters because it's only when you start to go at that level that you can have many other benefits in terms of, when you have to do auditing and plenty of things, because you can really make this operational. So I really appreciate the link. As well, knowing that Henk is a taxonomy and so on expert, it would certainly be interesting to that mix. Happy to, perhaps, if the new work item gets approved, maybe we send you liaison statement. So is it a way that you guys work here, or?
Roman?
Sorry?
What exactly do you want to send to us?
So simply to declare, maybe ITU could simply declare, we have started that work, it's about that.
Oh, excellent.
It's purely informational. Would it be a way? Okay. Okay. Right. So that's a really interesting point here. The second piece relates to the side meeting we just had. So it's just a remark to myself that now I understand that really I need to put on my work program to understand better what you guys are doing here, because now I start to feel the link possible between your work and endpoint and I really have the intuition there is more rich, there is more development we could propose, but let me first of all understand what you guys are doing better, and then I can perhaps propose other things. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Don't go anywhere quite yet. Just one quick thing, because I know Roman's going to have us come back to this as well. Updated milestones. So the only milestone we actually have associated with this on our milestones right now is to submit an initial draft, which we have met. Do we have any sense of when we'd be ready to how close do we, how many? I mean, the only reason, if you'll recall, the reason why the only milestone we have is because we were really hesitant to restart the work. So do we think we're a year away from being done, or 6 months, or?
I honestly hope not. I mean,
You hope not.
a
So-
year, I mean, so the way it's shaping up really is to be the more abstract thing. So I think we talked about this a
Right.
little bit, where what the intent of the draft is to specify, I don't want to, okay, it's describing an abstract architecture that is intended to provide the messaging infrastructure necessary for sending some payload, right? At this point, I care very little about what that payload is. I'm just saying, okay? I mean, so like when you look at the XMPP, the actual solution, right? We shoved oval through there, then, you know, CDDL, whatever it was, right? And it came back out. That could easily be IODEF. It could be anything, right? Some of the semantics and constructs and necessary things for like even configuration management, right? So like if you're an orchestrator and you're telling a collector, I want you to collect something, you're saying, you're telling it, collect this piece of information. That's one way to do it. You could also say, watch this information. From the architecture perspective at this level, I don't care which one they're saying. That's inside the payload. They understand that by capabilities, right? So we're trying to say, what are each component? What are the components? How do they express their capabilities to each other? And then how do they know what language they're going to speak within those payloads? And then we're done.
Exactly. Yeah. I wanted just to say, yeah, the architecture have to have a place that defines how to express what is the language you're just speaking, because otherwise it's just gibberish. So that has to be orchestrated, and therefore is on the architectural level.
So-
then I say that the data model stuff is totally opaque to you, and you don't care anymore.
Correct.
And that is absolutely
correct. Thank
Okay.
you. Much better. Yes.
Excellent. I was just looking for a date. So you don't want it to be a year, so you'd like it to be.
I don't do
6 months.
dates.
2 meetings?
Let's say that, yeah, okay, 2 meetings. I'd like to be optimistic and say that we'd be,
So
no,
what-
2 meetings, you're right.
No,
You
no,
said that.
so we can,
Okay, that's right.
no, we'll do working group last call, February 2020.
Okay,
That gives us a meeting and a half, and that means we'd be reviewing working group last call comments in the context of 2 meetings from now. How's that?
all right. Bill, what do you think?
You're on it, buddy.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill. Sorry to
So
laugh.
I see a milestone for this saying working with last call, December 2019. Is that the old one for Sacm architecture?
I think there is no, there was an initial draft one.
I'm reading working with last call, Sacm architecture, December 2019. We can make it read anything we want.
Am I not, I'm not seeing this.
Yeah, that's the next.
We'll make it read February 29th, 2020.
Oh,
Did you find it?
oh, I did find it. Sorry, I reloaded it. It was not there before, was it?
No.
See? Okay, so we're making that one February 2020.
So that's only a couple months, no big deal.
Okay, so that's architecture.
2 extra months right there.
That gets you through the holidays. Okay, so moving on. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Information model, it's you.
Can we talk about the other things on that list?
Uh,
Or do we have other business?
we still have, yeah.
But I'll go fast. I just want to say what Adam said. I said, so I'm just going to go over the information model. I posted a really rough, small, short draft. It really just so see, shockingly basic draft submitted. It has a handful of fields to describe the different elements. There's one interesting thing in here, but I'll come back to it. I'll come back to it right now. So what's in the draft right now is only a handful of elements. It's really aimed at kind of what Adam and Hank just agreed to, which is how do you enable kind of saying here's an endpoint, here's what the endpoint's capabilities are, or here an endpoint. Here's an interface. So I'll stick to Adam's terminology to the best of my ability while I speak. Here's an interface. Here's the interface's capabilities. And then there's a little bit of, some kind of command type stuff in there. So I added composite structure type notion in this. So this is information model, so this is still high level, but I haven't used it yet. I can envision that people might want it, but I'm not sure if I should keep it.
This is Hank, yes, please.
Okay, there's one vote for keeping it. And so, no, I lost battery.
You would just use that.
All right, I'm going to keep doing this from the chair's desk for a second. Ow, sorry. Yeah, so, I mean, there's one vote to keep it. That would really be about future-proofing this, but I can imagine its usefulness, especially if you, have any kind of version where you want to do a compound version of a host. But I haven't done anything like that yet. So another idea that's in there is the idea of an opaque information field. And so this is really kind of the basic description. And so I have communicated with Bill some. I needed to kind of finish this, which is right now, this is basically the thing that would have an envelope of some other type of data in the information. Thank you. So there's pros and cons to this, in my opinion. And so opinions on what we should do here are also welcome. So if I allow any kind of opaque element and let you to transfer anything as, just kind of a blob in the structure, then there's very little motivation to standardize more elements. On the flip side, to kind of Brett's comment from before, this potentially lowers the bar very much to doing any kind of implementation because there's only a handful of fields you need to put in, and then you can put in your blob as long as the other person knows what the blob is. Hank?
Yeah, this is Hank. I like the cookie cutter approach, but it remediates some of the problem we had. I am frowning at octet length on the information model level. That's an implementation specific problem.
So what I have so far has nothing with regards to how you would actually really represent the data or do any kind of serialization, deserialization. But it does let you, for me, octet length does let me think about kind of what the elements, what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, but if you say IP address octet length 4, you're forcing them to binary. So it's a data model thing, and I wouldn't touch that.
Fair enough. True. I don't know if your comment's valid. All right. So another kind of thing I'd like some feedback on. So I just have a handful of really, so most of the document was actually written, but I added this after I talked to Adam and Bill. So that was this week. Lucky for me, I didn't post anything till this week. So you didn't know that. I added run assessment, assessment result, capability to discover, obviously also have to be, some kind of version of how you do those negotiations. I envision some kind of enumerations that would be IANA register of, the types of data formats that could be exchanged in those opaque envelopes. I don't think that's a complete list of commands. I'm incapable of getting too far ahead of say, Bill and Karl-Heinz and anybody else who wants to participate. So I will, by necessity, lag them somewhat, hopefully by not too much.
Yeah, this is Bill. I'll just say that, that what you have is kind of in the same vein as things that Adam and I have discussed about things to put in the architecture as well, so we can coordinate on all of that.
That is absolutely the goal, and I'm tracking what you guys are doing as to what I put in here. So I obviously do want the information model to align, and I'm paying attention. Good for me. What? I am a chair, as it turns out, yeah, which means, I don't have to beat myself, although maybe I do, to read everything. This is the only place where I'm using a list currently. So there's, at least in the current version of the information model, there's one thing that's the command, and then there's an associated list, which could be the parameters and the return types. I don't know if that's the sane way to do it. I don't know if that's great in the information model, but that's what it is right now. And I'm happy to accept people's better wisdom.
So this is channeling Aaron McDonald on Jabber. Karsten would say that opaque was the X name mistake happening again.
Yeah, but I think I would have agreed with that when I described the opaque type up front. It's exactly the same. Yeah, it's an
I'm not Aaron McDonald.
No, I know, but so he's listening. So I would agree with him in that. Yeah, the X name is. I would have the opaque. The opaque is typed, and that would become a registry. It's only half or 3/4 as bad as the X header.
Dave Woltemar, I think Carson might be talking about PCP 178, which talks about not using like X names, because he gave the same comment on Kerswitz, so I went and looked it up. But I think that's the guidance on.
I'll have to look that up, but yeah, it's for me a little bit of chicken and the egg, right? Because I think we're going to exchange oval and ARF and maybe some version of concise map or IF map or those kinds of things, and I don't know how to square that circle. Yeah, and that was kind of it. And so this is the kind of feedback that I'd like to get from you guys. And obviously, I mean, I know Bill and Adam and I have talked, and I will continue to talk and follow what you guys are putting in there. But that's the gist of where this is heading, and I'm happy to have people help.
So we have about 2 minutes for discussing this. Any questions, comments?
I'll agree to the same milestone that Adam agreed to.
So I know it was just posted today. You'll agree to the same milestone that Adam did?
Yes.
Well, Adam was working group last call. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is Hank, and I'm agreeing with your process of lagging behind a little bit, which is because we are doing this code and have proof of concept, and it's actually viable. Then again, I see you start with addresses first, and always I'm a big fan of taxonomies, So maybe have the categories again and saying this is addresses intended to be used as identifiers, but they are not identities and yada, yada, yada. Maybe you have
So I actually do have
and
something.
that's why I thought you have lists for the parent types, for example.
So I have so category, I guess I have something that's kind of data use type, and so I can change that to category.
Oh, yeah, I see. Oh, I didn't get that. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Just real quick, so on architecture and this, happy to collaborate. I know that we intend to establish some registries. Your draft says it's going to establish some registries. We should at least collaborate for that, right?
Yeah, so absolutely, and then I assume some of them will be the same. And they only need to show up once.
So I just want to go back to milestones, huh?
This is an adopted one. Yeah.
That
that's-
was
I
my
gonna say
point.
we need to adopt- we need to adopt.
Yeah, no, we'll get there. So, so I was going to suggest that perhaps the initial draft would be, the initial milestone would be adopted as a working group document. And maybe we would set that for maybe September.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I think no more questions on, thank you very much for putting this in. So the next thing is next steps. And I think the first thing that we're going to need to do real quickly is our area director has asked us to look at our milestones, which were at the beginning of this meeting, woefully out of date, but some of them have now been updated. We have been. So the questions I had for you all were, so we set the Rowley software descriptor and CoSWID to August 2019 to go to IESG. We did 2020 for working group last call of the Sacm architecture. We actually need to put a milestone in for the EPCP to the IESG. So we will put that one in for September, let me see, I can't see Jess. September of 2019, you think that's, we can do October if you think that would be a little, let's go for October. Well, you did get, what was it, 96 or 97? 97 last minute comments, imagine that.
You did mention you let us know where the body ended up.
Okay, so that actually leaves three things that are on our current list of, so we need to add a milestone for the information model because we currently don't have that as a milestone. And that leaves three things that we don't actually have anything related to. Hello. I warned them earlier that I might separate them if they didn't stop talking. Okay. So the Rowley configuration checklist.
So the draft expired a long time ago, and I haven't made any updates to it. At this time, I don't have a 100% certain answer either way as to the fate of that document moving forward. If I can find the time, I would certainly like to work on it more.
The Rowley software configuration checklist.
Roman did it again. I mean, do people still want to do this?
Sorry, it's Adam. This is the configuration checklist really. Yeah. Maybe.
Was the answer maybe? Maybe. So maybe do we need to confirm we want to do this?
I guess, this is Bill, I guess for the Rowley checklist one, I would, I know you've got a template for like basically how it would be done. And so that makes it a lot easier, a little bit more straightforward. The only complication with that is to scope what you mean by checklist. Is that an XCCDF? Is that a data stream collection? What is that? Is it all of them? So the more formats that you can express the checklist, obviously the more complicated it makes it.
So let me say that, because I think that if I were to get the bulk of that text down, and then maybe come and talk to you guys instead for just that technical, filling in those technical fields, the detail, like once I say, oh, we're going to put XCCDF in it, come and talk to you and say, well, what fields or what things inside of XCCDF would be important to take out? I think that's a pretty small lift, and I can do the pros. So I think there's, between us, enough interest and effort to get an update down.
Okay.
In terms of milestoning, which I think what you're asking. Okay. I can have a fresh version of the draft with probably some input from these guys for the next meeting.
Next meeting.
Singapore.
I think the bogey we want to talk about is not the next draft, is when do we think we're going to go to working group class?
Well, I think that maybe we should edit the milestone because at this point, I think the point at which we had a date in there for submitting it to working group last call or submitting it to the IESG, we had a document that we were currently.
I mean, we could come up with a milestone for starting working group last call. I mean, if
Okay.
we wanted to do that, but I don't really care what the milestone, like what we pick is the milestone, honestly. Whatever works for you guys, we'll work towards it. I mean,
Well,
whatever.
I would, no, because, well, I can,
Yeah, okay, Roman, I mean, part of this is, do we have interest in doing it? Do we have energy to do it? Do we defer it? I mean, it'd be nice to be able to kind of have a plan to talk about. That's my point.
Dave Waltmar, I'm willing to help you finish it up. And there's not much left to do from my understanding. The last time I read it was maybe like 6 months ago, but it looked like things were kind of there. Right, and I have some expertise in those formats as well, so I can help you with those details too. Maybe since, I'm easy to find for you, I can help you put those details in, and then we can get Bill to do a solid review with your data.
That's already like something that's been adopted by the group, right? So the things about the stable version.
Yeah.
I have to go.
Some version of it. That's probably.
Okay, so.
So I can commit to helping from that perspective, and maybe that means we can have something that could be ready for the group to review by the next meeting.
So, so why don't we say submit to the IESG in March of 2020?
Okay.
Excellent. So then there's 2 more drafts, and actually the milestones are initial drafts, and I haven't seen initial drafts on either one of them, so perhaps we should defer these. And that's the ECP overtransfer and Yang push overtransfer mechanism. Look at that face. So,
Roman Zinelu, those look scare me. Do we want to still do this work?
Yang push is done. The only thing why I'm making this face was I didn't know that we planned for that. I totally forgot about it. I was like, what? So that's on me. Yes, it's a valid producer of information, and I assume that we can revive that when we are at a place in the architecture that has the appropriate set of operations to initiate that. So I would assume after the next meeting we can start working on that effectively. Before that, it is just wishful thinking.
so, but But it is still something that
Yeah.
we think we should do. So after the next meeting, so maybe initial draft in February 2020?
First of all, Young Push has to get RFCs. They're in the cluster now, in the editor cluster. I think this will have a result in like 2 months. And after, and during that phase, we can initiate the draft, have a 0-0 next meeting. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But I have to talk to push offers how to integrate this. There's a dependency there. I will not do this totally alone. So I will see. I would say we can start.
So all I want is a thumbs up, thumbs down. We're going to continue. So thumbs up, we're going to continue it. And we'll set initial draft end of this year, early next year.
End of this year is very likely.
End of this year is very likely. Okay, so we'll make it January of 2020. That way you'll have all of December. All right, and then the ECP one? No, it's a different draft. It's the ECP over transfer mechanism. It's not the.
That'll be harder to resolve than Jessica left you.
All right, so we'll take that one to list. Okay, so that covers all of our existing milestones. Hank, you only have to be quiet for 4 more minutes.
I'm sorry, I have a question for the notes.
For the notes.
Oh, for the notes. You can go.
I just want to know, like, what the official topic of the thing that Hank was just agreeing to.
Yang
The
push. Yang push.
Right, Yang push. So the other,
So, like, what about it?
That's enough for the
Okay.
for the notes.
And that was end of this year, early next year?
January 2020. Okay, so then the one thing that was not on, there's 2 more things on the agenda. One, we're not going to talk about it, but we don't currently have it on our milestones, but there is still that terminology document that has expired that
Some of the things might go into the information model eventually, so we have to prune that. It's actually, if I see the current scope, we are pretty fine. We just have to revive it when the time is right and the architecture has a place to get with the characterization profiles, yada, yada, but we are starting on that. So I think when the architecture is done, we should be able to complete the terminology iteration later. So give me 4 months after architecture.
Okay, architecture plus 4.
Yeah.
All righty. So the last item I have, I think that we have is schedule going forward. And, well, we will, I mean, for better or for worse, we seem to make better progress when we have virtual interims. So I was thinking, without at all coordinating with my co-chair, 2 virtual interims between now and the next meeting. I was thinking early September, early to mid-October. Is there anything that stands out really obviously at like maybe the week of September 9th? I'm looking at the week of September 9th, September 16th. Or, and then following that, the week of 7 October or 14 October. And so none of you all see any major, okay. So schedule 2 virtual interims. Anything else? Any other business? Excellent, thank you. You are free to go. You have 2 minutes left. I've become very controlling with